Good afternoon. I hope your week is off to a great start and this Monday is going well for you. We're going to be continuing our 12-minute at noon devotions. And this week, instead of going through one text, I'd like to actually take a psalm a day and just go through those. I think for me, when I don't know what to read or I don't know where to go in the Bible, I just pick up a psalm and look at that. Many of these psalms, they're songs. They're songs that have different emotions or different themes. And so depending on what emotions that you're going through, you're going to relate to different psalms. And for this one, we see that David has this theme, and he says it in verse 1 of Psalm 11. He says, in the Lord I take refuge. So I want you to remember that. In the Lord I take refuge. So he states that before anything else he says in the psalm as a way to kind of cue us in to say, refuge is going to be an important part of this song. So he says, in the Lord I take refuge. And he goes, how can you say to my soul? Now, we're not sure who you is. We don't know if it's his family, friends, advisors, but it's someone who's giving him counsel about a circumstance that he's going through. And the circumstance must be, pretty hard. It must be something that's creating a lot of fear and a response that, he should get away from the situation as quick as possible. And so he says, how can you say to my soul, flee like a bird to your mountain? For behold, the wicked bend the bow. They have fitted their arrow to the string to shoot in the dark at the upright in heart. If the foundations are destroyed, what can the righteous do? So this is something that he's interpreting the counsel as saying. Basically, flee to the mountain like a bird. Get away from it. And he's hearing it, and it's creating a lot of havoc in his soul, in his inner man. And I think that for us, when we have reports of fear, or when people start to fear and panic, their advice to you creates more fear. It's like that grows in you to the point that you're not thinking clearly, you're not thinking rationally, and you're reacting instead of planning and moving ahead with confidence and trust. And it's like everything that has been told to you during the daylight, you tend to doubt when it gets dark. And here, instead of his friends reminding him to take refuge in the Lord and to trust him, they're telling him, you need to get away. You need to get out of this. And I don't know about you, but I've had some people give me some awful advice through the years. I mean, people have really no clue about what I've experienced, what God has brought me through. And what they'll do is they'll tend to basically talk out of their experience. And they'll make the mistake of thinking that you're like them and that you should do what they did. Now, if you're asking for advice, that's different. But if somebody's just looking at your situation and they're just giving you advice freely, you need to be cautious of that, because what David's saying is that gets into my soul. So you're not just giving me advice, but you're basically planting seeds of fear in me that are going to grow and wreak havoc in my soul. So we need to be careful about giving and receiving advice that's based off of what I've experienced, because we have to realize that we don't know the whole situation, and not everybody is speaking on behalf of God in your life. So in this instance, David gets it right at the very beginning when he says, in the Lord I take refuge. Is the Lord your refuge? Is he the place that you go when you need advice, when you need your soul to have an anchor, to have something stronger than the storms you're going through? So he hears this, okay, and he has this report, flee like a bird to the mountains. I don't know if you've heard this story, but Tim Keller, he's a minister in New York. He shared this story that there was a lumberjack that was going into a grove of trees, And in a couple of weeks, they were planning on cutting down all these trees. And so he notices up in one of these trees that there's a mother bird who's making plans to build a nest, for her young, to raise them. And he realizes that if he doesn't, get this bird out of there, that this tree is going to be cut down, and her young and their future, is going to be ended. And so he shakes the tree, and the mother bird, is kind of disturbed about that, and she flies away. But he follows the bird, and she goes to another tree that's nearby. And this tree too is going to be cut down in a couple weeks. So he shakes the tree again, and this time she flies up and away into a cleft in a mountain nearby. And in this time of shaking, we could say God's shaking the world right now. We could say it's the enemy that is shaking things. I don't know who exactly that you have in mind that's doing this. But when all the shaking is going on, our response should not to be trying to make ourselves comfortable right here, but it should be to hide ourselves in the cleft of the rock. Now, the advisors that David has, they're telling him, you need to go away from the situation, and you need to do something radically different. When the advice that they should be giving him is to take refuge in the Lord. That God is going to hold you through this. And so we need to be people that put our home in things that will not shake. Mountains are strong. Mountains are firm. In the Bible, mountains are compared to God. That as they look up at the mountain, they see that is lasting. That's not going to be something that's going to be shaken and go away. And so like God, we can, and like the mountain, we can trust him. We can go to him, and we can build our home in him. Our soul, our peace can be in God. So verse 4, this is David's response to these advisors. And he basically takes it in, he digests it, and then he puts it through the faith and the trust in God filter. He says in verse 4, the Lord is in his holy temple. The Lord's throne is in heaven. His eyes see, his eyelids test the children of man. The Lord tests the righteous, but his soul hates the wicked and the one who loves violence. Let him rain coals on the wicked. Fire and sulfur and a scorching wind shall be the portion of their cup. For the Lord is righteous. He loves righteous deeds. The upright shall behold his face. Now, I want to hold on. I want you to kind of hold that last part. Behold his face. Because remember, it's the mountain. The mountain has a face, right? The face of the mountain is what what we see, right? And so he's saying that whatever he's hearing right now, all these reports, they don't need to create chaos and fear in his soul, because the Lord is on his throne. He is in control. He says he is sovereign. Sovereign means that he is the name above every name. We're hearing a lot about this COVID-19. We're hearing a lot about how it's spreading, and every day it's in the reports. It's everywhere. But we need to realize that does not need to be giving us a sense of fear where our souls are, not at rest. We need to realize that God is the name above every name, and he is the one that can be trusted. When everything is shaking around us, God can be trusted. There's an old hymn, on Christ the solid rock I stand. All others are like shifting sand. Unlike the builder who built his house on sand, it's foolish to be trying to build your life on what the world thinks is going to happen. We need to build our lives on the solid rock, on Christ, and put our trust in him. Now he says here in verse 4 and 5 that his eyes see. Now last week I talked about hiding. I talked about how God hides us, like refuge here would be God hiding us, and also how we try to hide from others and hide from God. And here he's saying something important, that not only is God on his throne, not only is God sovereign above every name, and his plans will prevail, but God sees and God tests. I love this saying that every trial is a test. It's a test. James 1 talks about how we should consider every trial with joy, because in that trial it's going to produce maturity in us. It's going to bring us further along. We're going to get to know God in a deeper way that's going to radically change our lives. And so trials should be looked at as a test. And here it says that the Lord sees us and he tests us. Now, what does he test? He tests what's in your heart. And what is David afraid that his counselors are going to do? Will wreak havoc in his life, in his soul. See, God sees the hidden places. He not only sees what we do and what we say, but he sees your heart. He sees what you dwell on day in and day out. What your true condition is in your heart. Now, if that creates some fear in you, I want you to take a pause and recognize that fear is to turn you to God, to go to him as a refuge. We know that God loves us, that we can with boldness come to him, to his throne of grace in our times of need. He is supposed to be the one that's a strong tower and the one that we can rely on day in and day out. And so if there's a tinge of fear in your heart, I want you to go to God and allow him to be that safety for you. God sees. So I love what's going on in the church right now, because the world is around us and they're creating a lot of panic, and they're creating a lot of sense of we should be afraid. But the church is not responding like that. I'm getting calls almost every day from people in my church, text messages. Our family's getting cards from different people in the church, and our churches is just being the church. They're reaching out to one another, encouraging one another. And that's what we need to do in this hour. We need to not give people reasons or sow reasons to be afraid and doubt, but we should be reminding the people, like this song, and the Psalm 11 does, that the Lord is our refuge. He can be trusted. So go to him today. I hope this word encourages you, and I hope you'll be back tomorrow as I go through another psalm.